are now listening to Talking Transparency, the podcast where transparents talk transparently. Hosted by Thea Ross, Melissa Lukeson, and Cody Connor.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Melissa.
I'm Cody.
And I'm Thea. On today's episode, we are talking transparently with Melissa, as we don't have a guest today, and we'll be talking about what went down at the trans family dinner this past weekend.
But first, let's take a look at what we got coming up on the calendar. You can find all of our events at caloscoalition.com/events. February 26th, and actually I just made sure I got the day off today in my little work day off thing. Got the email about it too. Is Equality Virginia Lobby Days.
Very excited.
Heading up to Richmond. Then March 17th, we got our next trans family dinner, which last one I think went pretty great. March 23rd, D&D group. FemFest is March 26th. March 28th is the Financial Literacy Workshop.
Oh, yes. I'm really excited about that one.
Our monthly workshop.
That's great.
I'm really excited about those workshops. Mm-hmm. It's just cool to be putting, useful things out in the community. And then on March 29th, Trans Day of Visibility at the Southeastern Transgender Resource Center from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. with a ball afterwards from 8 p.m. to when it ends.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I saw a post today. I think that they're selling tables for $150. So you can get refreshments, get the whole table to yourself. So if you want to go to the ball and you're listening, and better get the table quick.
That's awesome.
I had like a table dad joke going in my head. How am I going to put the table in my car after I buy it? It's the worst. It's the worst.
Well, we started a podcast called Talking Transparency. We had to figure the dad jokes would come in here eventually. So. But I appreciate you, Cody. Thanks for getting that all together and getting out here to record today. We have a nice little episode, just us and the gang chilling. We're going to talk transparently with Melissa for a while today. And I think, yeah.
Well, I'm actually super excited because I looked at my oldest, Alex, is coming to visit with their husband. And they will be here on the 16th, which means they will be able to join us for Trans Family Dinner,
So
which
excited.
Makes me so happy. And they'll be able to be a guest that week on the pod. So I'm actually really, really excited. And we'll have, Kevin joined too as well, being their husband. So I think it would be really great, to have, just have a great chat with them. Yeah, absolutely. So I know everybody's dying to hear about
your first trans family dinner.
My first trans family dinner. Yeah. Oh gosh, it was okay. First, I must say, wow, like what a spread. I was so impressed with walking in and all the food and all the effort. And I just want to say thank you to everybody, including producer Ty, who was hard at work also making eggs and making all the things. And y'all, I can't even tell you how amazing it was having all the food. And even though I was, occupied quite a large portion of Trans Family Dinner, having a very productive, I think, conversation with school board member, with school board member Mike Callan. I could hear the joy and the laughter and everyone just having such a good time. And what I also love is that I know that Mike Callan could hear that too. And it just felt really good, to be able to hear. And I mean, I didn't do a head count, but I felt like there was in and out more than 20 some people in and out.
I think we just
Maybe
over 30.
30?
I think we had 31
Okay.
people what we clocked in, which that isn't the most attended, but that's roughly about average what we're doing right now, which is really great.
It's great.
And I don't know, do we actually say it? Because I know last episode we were talking a lot about how Cody had met with Mike Callan, who is the Virginia Beach School Board member, and then we actually got him out to the trans family. I don't know if we actually had said that because it came in.
I don't think we did.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
Cody, you want to talk about how that, because
How did that
y'all,
happen?
I just need to tell you this. I shared Calos Coalition's post about Trans Family Dinner and got text messages and phone calls wanting to know how it happened. That they saw a picture with me sitting at the table with him in someone's home, right? Not right. And so, Cody, can you tell us how that happened?
Right. So a couple episodes back, we talked about how Mr. Callan, Mike, Mike, he insists that I call him Mike.
Of course.
And I had coffee together, did lunch together. And so since then we've exchanged some messages, and in one of those messages I told him I guess I could actually probably grab the message.
Just grab the message.
And grab the message right here.
I also would like to say that, but while Cody's looking for that he came alone, which was very brave of him. Mm-hmm. He didn't come with a whoopee like his wife or anything, you know. I mean, I want to acknowledge the bravery.
I did tell him he could bring a guest. Mm-hmm. So I just reached out, and said, I host a community dinner once a month for the trans people and their families and allies. Many of our attendees are families and trans people of all backgrounds and religious beliefs, devout Christians, Jews, atheists, etc., all breaking bread and just enjoying fellowship together. If you are ever interested in attending, let me know. It'd be a chance for you to speak with and get to know some very good people. And so I just sent him that message, and he responded with, I would be interested in learning more about your event, such as date and time and location. And so I said it is always the third Sunday of the month from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. So this Sunday and March 17th are the next ones. I did say the location changes.
We've been pretty consistent for the past couple of months, but yeah, we change the location every now and again. Exactly.
And he responded with, I can do this Sunday. I don't know if I could stay till 8 p.m., which he did, but I can join you at 5. Let me know where and I'll be there. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah,
since you have his phone number, can you ask him why his license plates say Daddy Red?
I probably could. I don't know how that'd be in a text, but next time I talk to him, I could. I'm actually still waiting for him to respond to my last message.
Oh,
We'll talk about that a little later.
We'll talk about that a little later, but yeah.
I know when you had reached out to me and you said that you had Mike Callan, that he was willing to come, I kind of there's a moment where I freaked out because the Trans Family Dinner is not supposed to be a political space. It really is supposed to be the space where trans folks can come and be okay. Like you're in a space with majority trans folks and people that support you, and you can let your hair down and just be yourself. And having someone come into that space, who might be more antagonistic, have aggressive views or adversarial views, that sort of thing was kind of scary. But I trust you, Cody, and I also know that you would, you're a father. That's one of the things that we do at these dinners is we have trans parents, we have trans, and it is a matter of negotiating. And I was so pleasantly surprised of how he actually showed up and everything. And the first thing that came to my mind, I got someone to skip over this, is Miss Victoria. I don't know if we've ever talked about Miss Victoria. She's a very close personal friend of mine. I met her down at the STRC months and months and months ago now, and she is a 62-year-old. I know she's going to hate me for telling out her late. I'm sorry, Miss Victoria, in advance. Trans woman, and she's a very devout religious person, and she has a strong Christian faith that cannot be shaken, and it's something that's, I won't tell her story. I'd love to have her on some night. So, foreshadowing, we can talk more about her background, but I knew that having been in the community for as long as I've been actively out, I feel like it's amazing to me the number of trans people that are super religious, or at least somewhat religious culturally or personally, or they find their own ways back to religion or their own access. And Miss Victoria, as opposed to that, is very traditional.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
she has her views and is so strong, and she gave Mike Callan. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was really great, actually. It was great. And so Cody told me that he said, hey, I invited Mike Callan and he is going to come to Trans Family Dinner. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, I had it on my calendar, but trust me, I will be there because I wanted to see him. I wanted to see if he showed up, right? Because, saying you're going to come and then actually showing up and not canceling at the last minute or finding a reason to not, in it was courageous. And I did acknowledge that. I believe in using the sandwich method. So I definitely did start with Mike, and I told him that I appreciated him behind the dais paying attention to the speakers, because there are a lot of people on the school board that, get on their phones, they're on their laptop, they're not paying attention. And I will say about Mike, he does at least honor the speakers in the way where he's actually looking at them. So, and he is engaged. He's not dead-eyeing and, you know what I mean, just ignoring. I do think I don't believe ultimately that Mike will radically change his beliefs. But I do believe that he is open to listening and learning. And I think that through time, that will soften some of his beliefs. And at the end of the day, like I said to him at the table, you are too dangerous for me to allow you to be reelected into this position. So I can't have you reelected into the school board position. And the fact that he only ran, he wasn't involved in the school board at all before he decided to run, because it was he made his decision to run based on culture politics. It's imperative that this is his last term, as far as I'm concerned. And that is not anything personal against Mike, which is what I try. Like, I'm sure you're a nice man, right? I am sure your kids love you. I'm sure your wife loves you, like all of those things. But I can't have you as a policymaker when the reason you joined and you became an elected official was rooted in lies, misinformation, and fear. So I intentionally, and I. Okay, here comes the U.S. Navy again.
You looked at him and you were like, "I will unelect you." Like he's like, "You are not going to win." Like,
you are not going to. Yeah. Oh,
it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
I literally wanted to jump out of my seat, and I was like, yes, please. But no, I digress. Continue.
Well, so when we got there, this was the thing, and I noticed that when I arrived it was like 10 minutes after 5. So I don't know how long he had been there. Hello, U.S. Navy.
Tonight.
They are active tonight. Sorry, guys. This is just what happens.
Wouldn't be a podcast in Virginia Beach.
Right. So I came in and he saw me come in. He was actively engaged with your dad, which I think was very important, because he immediately found a peer that he could relate to.
I thought it was a really great setup.
Great. It was a great
brought
setup.
Him in, introduced him to Thea's dad, who's
it's amazing,
similar age, and
another person I'd love to have on the podcast.
I would love to have.
He actually walked up, and I was outside putting the sign up, because we got the fold-up sign that we put up by the front door, so people know they're in the right place. And he walked up, because I was like, "Oh, hi," and said, "Oh, hi." He gave me this weird look. I mean, it was like it was like, "Oh, am I in the right place? Or what's going on?" And I said, "Oh no, you're in the right place. Come on." He was very, very nice and warm. And, honestly, it's so weird for you to say that he didn't change his political opinion, because I could have swore that we cracked that man's egg.
I mean, listen.
Like, I think he would have looked great.
Well, I'll look.
And, like in some heel, but I digress. I know. I'm sorry, Mike, if you're listening.
But
I don't mean to be mean.
I'll get back.
We don't crack eggs at the trans family dinner.
No. But I'll get back to that actually and address that, because it is kind of funny based on the school board meeting last night, actually. But I'll get back there. So I was, of course, I mean, I am engaging and talking to people, but I am eye on the prize. Target acquired. I am not. Like, I am going to be social with everybody here, but for me, and I think you have to remember something. I worked, and every year for the last couple of years, I have worked at the election. For the 6 weeks before the election, I work out for early voting. So out at the remote location. So the recreation centers, building 14, the registrar's office. And I will work out there, and I during the day, and hand out ballot guides to voters and talk to voters. So during his election, I talked to his brother more than I talked to Mike Callan, because Mike Callan knew who I was and he did not talk to me. And he knew I was a constituent, but he did not talk to me. And like I said, when you're out there, you're out working, and I'm surrounded by other Republicans. I don't go out of my way, but I also shouldn't have to. I'm a constituent, and you are running for office. I don't care if he just told me about, I guess what I should say is he made it very clear about his political beliefs, so much so that you wouldn't even speak to me because I was working out there for the Democratic Party. So then he got elected, and he has the protection of the dais. So then he only hears me, that I get to address him behind a microphone. I'm sorry, but the days for me of placating and having to reach out to elected officials for them as a local public activist, community activist, like, sorry, but you should pick up the phone and call me. Period. Like,
I absolutely adore you, because honestly, that's the way it should be.
It's the way it should be. It's absolutely the way it should be. If you're going to step up
and participate on that level, it's a two-way street.
That's right.
They should be so lucky.
So this was kind of, for me, the opportunity to say, you can't make me a monster if you're forced to sit at the table and break bread with me. And I'm not a monster. So let's figure out who the monster is at the table. How about that?
I mean, I think that was a big part of getting him to the dinner altogether, was to show him these are people.
The people,
like
right. It's easy to dehumanize people when you don't have to interact with them. And so I was watching him, and man, I tell you what, like, Cody was on it, because he could see I'm holding my plate. I'm not even sitting down in a seat anywhere. I'm just holding my plate, eating my food, waiting for Mike Callan to find a seat. And he, for a minute, got his plate, and he was standing there and eating like I was. And then Cody was like, oh, you can go sit in the dining room. And so him and Art go in and sit down in the dining room. I was like, I look at Kim DeWitt, and I'm like, I will be back. And I went beelined right for the dining room and found myself a spot. And we started with your dad, Thea, Cody, myself, and Mike. And then as we sat there and more people needed seats, more people sat down. And I didn't immediately go into I listened. We talked about, I asked him some questions about himself. Like, did he ever go in the military? Is he from here? Some background stuff. And then when all the seats were full at the table, that your dad set it up for me really well, unknowingly. He didn't obviously mean to, but he just kind of set it up for me perfectly, because he had asked him a question about, being the CFP, I think he is, for a job. He's like financial planner. And then I said, well, so what made you run for school board, Mike? And I already knew the answer to the question, because for anybody who knows me, you know that I already know answers to the questions before I ask them. And if you don't know me, you know that now. So you should be prepared for that, right? So I was like, what made you run for school board? And I knew that he was knocking on doors saying he was running because his granddaughters would be in the bathrooms with trans students and he wanted to protect them. Like, that was one of his actual talking points, knocking on doors. And I know this not because he knocked on my doors, but because he knocked on doors of people I know, and they told them, and people that my friends know, and they told them. So, okay, pass on ignorance. Well, now you're sitting at this table. You're not getting a pass on ignorance, and you are an elected official. And I am your constituent, and I have questions directly related to these issues that you actually ran and campaigned on. And so while I didn't want to make it uncomfortable for other people, I wasn't going to miss the opportunity, right? And I think that was the space and one thing I respect about Mike was that he was honest. He glazed, when I asked him why he ran for school board, he gave a glazed over answer. It was like, I was concerned about my granddaughters or something, and he didn't. And then
safety or something
like that. And then I think Cody's butthole might have puckered up, because then I said, well, what exactly was it you're afraid of, Mike? And he looked at me right in my eyes, which, again, I can respect anybody who can make and maintain eye contact. He made and maintained eye contact long enough for me to read his nonverbal language of saying, I know exactly what you're doing to me right now. And then he said the truth. And I will always honor and respect someone who says the truth when asked. He was asked the question, it glazed over, but he at least, at a table with trans people, trans family members, he didn't try to do what a lot of politicians do. He knew exactly the question I was asking him. He knew exactly the answer I wanted to hear from him. And he did say it. And so then we were able to, and I do have to say this, and if he does listen to this podcast, I think it's also important for him to know, like, obviously, you know, we all have certain responses, right? And so I could feel his energy because of that. And he was definitely in like a little fight mode for sure, I think too. And I definitely was in fight mode to the point that, y'all, my arms were going numb. Like, I'm not kidding. My arms. And that is like the first sign of a panic attack for me. And it's only because I was straight up like, fight. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he got me, like, I was like, oh, you want to maintain eye contact, do you?
Listen, I was around the corner taking bets, Melissa. I mean, it was intense.
And so I quickly was like, Melissa, you are vibrating right now. Literally, like, vibrating. And when I can recognize that about myself, I'm very self-aware. And I recognize that. And I was like, okay, take a breath. And like, let's just settle in. You're not in danger, because that's a trauma response too in a lot of ways, right? But just because somebody has triggered something in you and you're like trying to maintain control. And for me, that was me. Like, because again, if I don't have a speech written, I'm like, motherfucker, you know, I just, so true.
No, honestly though.
But yeah,
it was refreshing. And I did the exact opposite.
Yes.
When I saw he came in, you know, I talked to him for a split second and I got out of there. I let my dad talk to him because I didn't want to immediately go into 1,000 different points that I could go into. And, you know, being with my background, policy debate, and I tend to get faster. The more panic, like I can go like 350, 450 words a minute, somewhere between there if I practice. Yeah. So if I really want to get going, I can get going. It can be very overwhelming.
Yeah.
So what I tried to do was just stay out of the room. And you were so funny. You said it was empty when it first began. I was in the other room sending people in. I was like, hey, Miss Victoria, did you know that Mike Callan is here? Hey, by the way, you know, because a lot of folks didn't realize it, because, you know, we have a large house. We have like lots of different areas where people congregate.
Amazing.
So that people can,
it's such a great space.
It is. I love it. But I feel like it's funny because I knew if I was there, I would have got like that. And I was hosting the event. I wasn't there to have the debate with Mike Callan the same way that and I'm so glad that you were there to do that. I was there to host the trans family dinner, and I got a chance to go in there and have my little spar with him. And I got to listen to a lot of those conversations. And I'm glad that I handled it that way, because I feel like, you know, it's my house. If he come into my house and we were like pummeling
100%.
him, and I think my father also gave him a nice soft landing.
Yes,
my father's an older, you know, more he has a conservative background. You know,
he does.
For a lot of part of his life, he'd say he's more of a conservative. He was
he said like he was a Reagan Republican.
I think he's a little embarrassed of that these days, but I don't know. I don't want to speak for him.
I know. Well, I know, but that's one of the things I love about your dad is that he can say like, this is, you know, I would love to have more political conversation with your dad, because, you know, he really, you can tell that he really understands the problems and issues with the policies that he was voting for before. Like, and it's like hindsight is 20/20, right? If certainly there are people, myself included, that's like, God, I would never have voted for that person if I had known that this is the way, this was the path that would lead down. Because when we vote, we we think that our votes, and I, it's really hard for me to say this because I don't ever want to say your vote doesn't matter, because your vote matters. Your vote matters, right? However, you have to start thinking less about your vote right now, and you need, like, what the result of your vote is right now, and know that your votes are actually votes that have impacts for decades. And so instead of like voting for people based on, oh, well, it can only be here for 2 or 4 years, or, 6 for senators or whatever, understanding that, like, especially on state and federal level, it actually has impacts into decades, unlike a local where it has more immediate impact, right? And so I appreciate your dad's perspective from that. And it helped Mike settle in and be more comfortable. And I feel like we all read the room very well and came in at the right times with the right messaging, right? Because then Victoria enters the religious aspect, which is really foundational to Mike Callan's beliefs about the LGBTQ community.
Because that's what he said. That was my understanding is, when you talked about pinning him down, talking about, his granddaughters and why he ran, from what I heard him express was his sincere belief about bathrooms specifically, and about, his kids and trans rights and those sorts of things, and how they were based in religious beliefs and how they were sincerely held religious beliefs. And, I don't want to get off into a little sparring match with him, because I really wanted him to have to like look me in the face. As someone who graduated from like Virginia Beach City Public Schools, someone who like coached a policy debate in the schools, I felt like I really needed him to understand, like, you're talking about criminalizing me. You're talking about criminalizing people like me and children. When I was a kid, treating me as if I was different. So I think that those sorts of things are putting it right in someone's face and making them uncomfortable is important. But it was so funny because when I actually got through it, and I could go all through the specific points or whatnot. I asked him, I said, why do we have separate bathrooms to begin with? Why do we have men and women's bathroom? And I said, if you ask me, I think it's because of patriarchy. I think it's because we decided as a society that men are so dangerous that they have to be put into a separate society. But we don't want to protect young boys. Young boys can still go in there and are still being exposed. Right. And then regardless of that, it really is sort of this like abetting of this rape culture, and saying, well, those boys just can't control themselves, or, boys will be boys, all that sort of stuff that we've heard for years. And those sorts of things allow for the exact abuse that you say you're afraid of. If you're afraid of your daughters and your granddaughters and their granddaughters, then you should be more concerned about, like, hey, those rapists come right out of that bathroom door, and the bathrooms are right next to each other. And
that's why I open with that. I was like, that's why it is rooted in misogyny, this transphobia, homophobia, but transphobia specifically is rooted in misogyny. And that's why I asked him, do you have a son? And he was like, yes. And I said, well, did you teach? I said, first, do you know that 98% of violence against women is at the hands of men? And, I don't think he knew that, but he acknowledged my point. And then I said, did you teach your son about consent and to not assault women? Because why are we not having these conversations with our sons? And why are we not talking about the real issue here is boys and ultimately men? Because we wouldn't have to have these conversations if kids were safe in the bathroom, right? And it's now, I will say, violence in the bathroom also happens at the hands of girls and women, as we will be sharing a story here shortly that is in the news that is very difficult and distressing to talk about. But it's not. But when we're talking about the reasoning behind, like the Mike Callan running, it absolutely was completely surrounded about his granddaughters.
And it's misogyny. And I'm sorry, if it makes Mike uncomfortable for me to say the reason why you ran was misogyny, we could put it another way. If you don't want to call it misogyny, let's call it what you proudly proclaim it as, sexism. You are running to define sex as this is that, and that is sexism.
Yes.
And it's a specific flavor of it, misogyny, but still. And I think that a lot of people feel like, oh, well, I'm not a sexist. I'm not this. But when you actively say sex has to be this one thing, that's what it is, then you are by definition,
Yep.
a sexist.
As you are by definition. Yep. Absolutely.
I mean, in a lot of ways, that's what a lot of these laws are about.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, when we talk about how so many of these things are really a threat to patriarchy, right? Like that's why this small percentage of people, trans people that are just beautiful people, living their life, just trying to do their thing, are this huge giant threat that the Air Force is going to bomb.
Please.
It's the Navy, y'all. The Navy.
The Navy.
They have pilots too.
Yes, the Top Gun pilots.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I thought the Navy was in boats. No, I'm sorry.
But
they are.
You know, the trans community, the LGBT community in general, blurs that gender line.
Yep.
And that gender line has to exist for patriarchy to exist. It's got to be
blurs and threatens.
solved. Yeah, blurs and threatens. And when you look at the laws, especially as they progress, right? It starts by defining spaces, men's space, women's space.
White people.
And now we've moved into defining exactly, you know, like in Florida, those laws. In Utah, the new laws that are being proposed, where we're then setting that binary for the sexes in legal bold, which is exactly what's needed to reinforce the patriarchy. And that's in a lot of ways, that's the goal, is to legally codify the patriarchy and just make all of that wrong and all of that power legal and okay.
Right. And then in the name of religion, which, you know, because if you really look at it, it's really just sociopaths and evangelicals left over that really believe like this, right? Because that have these very rooted beliefs. It comes from evangelicals or religious people, and then sociopaths. Because if you hate the trans community or the LGBTQ community, and you are an atheist, then you're just a sociopath at this point to me, right?
Well, I mean, religion in so many ways is just one of the first iterations of encoding
psychopathy,
patriarchy into law.
Oh yeah, sorry. But it was, but sorry, my insert there with religion and psychopathy. Which is why Victoria coming into the mix and entering was so important.
And I think also there's this other factor that goes in, because it's not just religion or religion being bad or Christianity being, it really comes down to like the way in which you view those beliefs within the concept, the construct of policy. When you are saying, hey, you know, it's okay for me to believe this, and but you can't, you have to believe something different. It gets a little bit confusing. So,
well, and also no religion should have influence on policy, because there is no single religion. I mean, why would we make policy that isn't benign? I mean, all policy should be benign in the sense of it should have absolutely nothing to do with a religious belief system, because no religious belief systems are the same.
But you see, the SCOTUS has completely obliterated, what is it, the Lemon test and all those different tests for entanglement, excessive entanglement, things that existed for a long time.
Yep.
And at the same time, they've put forward this doctrine of religious liberty. And I think that, you know, we can talk about religious liberties and how they are a necessity and they should be protected and all these sorts of things. But then how they interplay with civil rights. Because we talk about civil liberties and religious liberties, and wherever civil liberties cross over religious liberties, there is a technical restriction of those religious rights. In the same way that, you know, you may believe it's your religious right to kill somebody, but there's still laws, civil laws, that intersect and keep you from being able to do that. So that's part of civil society that you have to give up. And I think that what we've come around to, and the SCOTUS has come around to, they said, hey, religious liberty actually entails that the state cannot put any limitations whatsoever on your freedom of expression. And I think that absolutist expression, necessarily leads to the death of civil rights, because these things are in direct. If I have to sacrifice my civil rights so that your religious rights can lead, these things exist in competition, unfortunately, due to the framework that's being enforced by people like Amy Coney Barrett and some of those other folks who have been lobbying in organizations. She's direct. What is it? The Alliance Defending Freedom.
Oh, yeah. The ADF.
And those organizations that, actively internationally advocate for the death of queer folks and for the imprisonment of queer folks. And I think for a lot of Americans,
believe that biblical text that says they should be stoned to death.
But I think of a lot of Americans, they don't really think about the logical extension. Like, if your religious liberty goes to stoning me to death, or your neighbors, or throwing your neighbors in prison because they use the wrong bathroom, I just think
where's my personal liberty as a human?
Exactly. Where's my civil rights? Where's my
your civil rights? Right, and that's where civil should always, in my opinion, always trump religious.
Because we have a choice.
We are humans. We exist here in this space right now. And like, I don't understand. I mean, I will never understand the cognitive dissonance required for people to harm others while professing that they love Jesus or love God.
That's the point.
I can't. I just.
It's almost like an intentional misleading, because I think oh goodness, I lost my train of thought there again. But I think that religious liberties they're always going to have to. We have a choice. We have a choice between living in a civil society that is secular or an uncivil society that is religious.
Yeah, great. Yeah,
and the balance between those two different things is where the line of the law should be. And when we have SCOTUS making a clear decision and sending these things down, even though federal appellate courts and long-standing traditions in the United States for hundreds of years have gone and slowly been the erosion of these things, whether we talk about things like the Southern Baptist Convention arguing that slavery it should be protected because of religious liberty. And these sorts of ideas, they're not new.
Yeah.
And we should, as Americans, realize what's attacking us, what we're fighting, and that it will eventually come for you. Because even if you think that I'm weird or that trans people are wrong or you want to have a debate or whatever, eventually those folks will come for you and yours. They will find something that makes, and if not, then you are going to have to conform
in the social
into
hierarchy.
An ultra-conservative hierarchy system. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a social hierarchy.
Eventually, in those systems come for everybody. Because in order for them to exist, they need a target, which means eventually everybody becomes a target. I mean, that's the whole concept of when you hear sayings along the lines of evil will always lose because it eats itself. And that's what it is hate like that. Structures like that always need something to attack. That's how they exist. They exist to attack.
They just scapegoat.
And so once one target has been eliminated, they want to continue to exist. It's a living entity.
I got one better for you. Once they go say, "Oh, these people, they're the reason why our lives suck. If only we can get rid of those people," and then they do it. They get rid of the people, but your life still sucks.
Your life
that's right.
sucks.
So then it's these people.
It's like only if I win the lottery.
It's the next person. It's that next.
And then it's who's ever left.
Yep.
Because fascists don't know how to build things. They know how to scare bureaucrats and construction workers and average people into doing things for them. That only goes but so far, doesn't it?
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, I mean, I think ultimately, Mike stayed for conversation. He did,
he stayed much longer than he said. He said he was.
Yeah, much longer, because I think it was like 7:45, and he was like, "Oh, I think it's about about that time." And we'd had a lot of conversation, and so, funny enough, on the school board, it is when there's an issue that comes up, it's just natural, like that if you're advocating for an issue, you're trying to talk to people, you're going to do a vote count, right? In your head of who you think is going to support what. And this is, we listen to what people say, and we're making these assumptions a lot of times based on obviously previous track record, and what they're saying when they're talking about the issues in discussion. And historically, since Mike Callan has been elected to the board, he has, on cue, voted with his Republican cohorts on the school board, and which is expected, and it's fine. We don't expect anything else, right? Because
nothing strange there.
Nothing strange there, right? Gosh, it's amazing what it's like. We do not expect independent thinking from many members of our school board, but there's been a big issue with the calendar. So the school calendar, Virginia Beach has not been able to get their shit together because Virginia Beach Public Schools has definitely not been, there's been a lot of changes, and they just haven't been able to get their shit together with the calendar. And the initial calendars they put out were awful, and they caught a ton of feedback from the community.
Would you say that they're behind the curve? I'm sorry. Continue, please.
Behind the curve, yes. And so they voted last night on the 2024-2025 calendar. And this is not a political issue. I just need everybody to be clear. This is not a political issue, okay? But when you're talking about pre-Labor Day start, post-Labor Day start, oh boy, you start seeing where people
are pretty hot.
People are hot
over that week.
And it is so interesting to me because I am like, I mean, it doesn't affect me. I don't have kids in school, so I haven't really been like as invested in this calendar argument. But what I thought was funny was last night, Mike Callan voted with the others. What? He voted with the people that he doesn't normally vote with. And so it was kind of a joke in my school board group. We were discussing because I did send them evidence that I broke bread with Mike Callan and my little group of school board activists, and I told them that it was good, and then all of a sudden he voted with the calendar this week. So we were just kind of joking. We're like, oh, he goes to trans family dinner. Next thing you know, he's voting with the Democrats.
Oh
boy, look, I mean, so it's funny because when you said, you were like, you really think we didn't have any impact? I mean, if I'm being honest, again, it's not that I don't believe Mike Callan will change his position with regard to what he believes to be right or wrong or whatever, because it's so rooted in religion.
I have a question.
I think he'll soften up and at least say that he understands more, though.
Is he married?
He is. I've not met his wife, but I've seen him with his wife.
Does his wife know where he was Sunday night?
I
imagine she does. Yeah.
Does she know that Mike Callan went over to a very attractive young trans woman's home and had dinner?
Well, I mean, I hope they listen to this podcast, and and I assume so. I'm sure he was like, listen, go on here, and it's a very attractive young woman's house.
Yes. What can I say? Miss Callan, it's the third Sunday of the month. Where's your husband? I apologize. That's so inappropriate.
That's hilarious.
He's very old.
He's very old. But yeah, no. And so it is just kind of funny that, and again, it's really easy to not vote with your political friends or peers when it doesn't affect people's lives. And so any level of excitement or acknowledgement that Mike Callan voted in opposition, put in a vote that I know that the people in his party that sit on that dais were definitely not happy about, because they certainly didn't vote that way. And I think that they fully expected him to vote with them, which ultimately it would have been a tie vote anyways, I guess, because we were down 2 school board members last night for the vote. But I don't know. Like, I don't, again, like, yeah, sure, calendars, like, be brave, go against your political party for, like, the calendar. But, like, nah, bro. Like, I want to see you actually go against your party to do the right fucking thing.
I mean, in a lot of ways, even if just one day and he's in a conversation with one of his friends or family and they say something stupid and he finds himself going, no, that's not true. I know some of those people.
Yes.
Even that's
important.
That's important.
It is. And Cody, like you bring up a really, really valid point. And I would like to believe that Mike would.
Yeah, I'd like to believe that he would.
I would like to believe that.
I'd like to believe that he would. I think if we were to get more interaction with Mike, we could definitely get to where I would believe that he would.
Right. Exactly. That's why I say I would like to believe. I'm not there because, and I talk about this a lot. I talk about people's social capital, right?
Yeah.
People are very afraid of losing their social network, and many people have very small social networks. Many people have large social networks. The people specifically with the small, social networks are always definitely more, they don't want to alienate the people that they socialize with. And so
it depends on why their social network's small too.
Well, of course, right. But like a lot of times, like, when you're socializing, especially like Christians specifically, the church, one thing that I noticed every time I was a member of the Christian church that I notice it now. I didn't really notice it then when I was in it, but when I was a member of the Christian church, I realized how much of they bring you in socially to where it's, my husband and I did a really good job as members in the church where we kept our like we had our church social group, people that we would socialize with our church. And then, but we still kept primarily like our social life that was outside of the church. But so many people, their entire social network is in their church. Other than a few outliers and maybe coworkers and things, but like those people are outliers to them, right? They're social networks. And that's kind of what the church does. And that's not, I'm not saying that's even necessarily a bad thing because it provides community for people that don't necessarily have community. But the problem is that you also might find yourself in an echo chamber with bigotry.
Well, and you can very easily, whether by design or not, find yourself in a situation, especially with the way the conversation is about beliefs now, right?
Yeah.
Because you'll hear, I heard Chris say this. I heard Mr. Callan say this, I think at the meeting. I said something about it.
You're talking
to
about Chris
him.
Taylor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Values.
Yeah, they love.
Right? I'm Republican because of my values.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're Republican because of your beliefs.
That's right.
We have this like pretense that we share some different value, like you believe in being a good person and I don't.
Right.
You know what I mean? No.
Yeah. Nope.
No, we have the same. We both believe in being good people. Like we both believe in like not stealing from other people, and we both believe in like
that is a value.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I do think we have different values because I do not think that we should take people that are in a bathroom and put them in jail against their will. He does.
Oh yeah, well yeah.
But he doesn't. But it's what they call it to what it actually is. That's what Cody's saying. They interchange values and beliefs, and they're not the same.
No, and actually, if we were really use the word values and really focus on what our values are, and not exchange beliefs for values, because once we exchange beliefs for values, then we could say, well, I believe in being a Christian and those are my values and that's why I'm better than you and you're wrong. Right?
Yep,
but once we start actually talking about values, well, then we start being able to shine a light on certain things like how we really live our lives and how our values are supporting and loving, accepting people, and your values are putting people in jail for using a bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's a very helpful framework because it really does put you into it. What is important to you, and then what is been told that's important to you.
Well, in value, think about this though. Science uses values, right? Mm-hmm. Science uses values. Yeah. How many? Beliefs aren't as much in the scientific framework, right? You don't you don't have scientists being like, well, I mean, yeah, you believe, but like you believe because you saw facts, which came from values, like data sets, right?
I think the beginning, like, of the hypothesis is where the belief that, like, you believe that might be true, and then you test it.
And then right, and then you get to you use values, and I'm like, so for me, values should be something that are based and rooted in, I mean, I guess some people would say morality, but actual fact. Like, we are human beings that deserve respect and love, and we know this to be true because we all want to have these same things, right? But beliefs, like for me, a belief can change. I don't ever want to be so rooted in my belief system that I can't change with new information.
Well, and a belief doesn't actually dictate how you live. It's how you think you should live.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Right? Your values, that's how you live.
It's your action.
That's how you actually live your life.
Right.
And that's a big kind of gap that happens there too, right? Is, well, I believe in this.
Right.
But that's why certain people that believe have to qualify that they live what they believe, right?
It's always the ones that do that, though, that aren't living the way they believe. And that's the thing about Mike Callan, is I actually think that Mike has probably lived a life that has been, put it this way, I don't think that Mike has a ton of skeletons in his closet of stuff that you know what I'm saying? I believe that he has probably lived and tried to live in a way of which that, you know, that his beliefs have led him. But I mean, we all know the hypocrisy that lives within religion in many ways. And so I can look at somebody like Mike and go, you know, man, you probably have been a pretty solid dude your whole life. You know what I mean? Just going to work, raising your kids, coming back. I don't think you have any crazy skeletons in your closet. And I can be okay with, I can respect that. It's the majority of people that I think that are putting those beliefs on other people, and they're not actually living red letter Jesus. That's what I was saying. Red letter Jesus.
And just attaching something in regards to beliefs that don't exist.
Right.
Like, we have different beliefs, so you must not care about your kids.
Right.
Or we have different beliefs, so you must be a terrible neighbor. You know, we have different beliefs, so, you know, you must not be a hard worker. No,
why do people put that, like, on those assumptions on people, right?
I mean, in some ways, because we exist very much in our society in competition with each other.
We do.
Right? And a lot of religion, especially Christian religion, especially monotheistic religion, is about we are the only religion.
Right.
That statement by itself, we are the only right religion, then immediately puts you in competition with every other religion that exists.
And competition on what grounds? Because this whole conversation makes me think about Nietzsche a lot. It makes me think about Nietzschean philosophy, you know, and talking about really getting to the essence, what is good and what is evil? Yeah. You know, specifically the work beyond good and evil. When we say, you know, you can oftentimes replace the word good, this way I think of it, with the word useful. And you can replace the word bad with useless. And that's generally how people use and understand these. So when we talk about value, the value of something is like, and the difference between belief, like believe, or I have a belief that there are pink elephants dancing on by right now that you can't see, or I value the pink elephants that are dancing by that you cannot see. Those are two very different things. And then it also comes down to, is your belief a good thing or a bad thing? And then are your values a good thing or a bad thing? Because I can believe in something that may or may not be true, and that can be aspirational and give me strength, and that can also build community and all sorts of things. And I've seen that enough to understand that. Sure. But also, if you don't value what is real, and then you end up in a weird place. And then also, if you don't take the time to evaluate things, to look at it and say, is this good or is this bad, then the entire framework gets skewed. Because like you said, there is this religious conflict. There's one God in these monotheistic frameworks, so it has to be one right about what is right and wrong, good or bad. And those sorts of frameworks, I think, the values we share, and the value that I took out of the existential philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche as an adult is to understand that, like, we all share this as human beings, a type of goodness. We all live on the planet Earth. We breathe air. We drink water. We have to have food.
Yep.
We all have certain needs, humanistic needs and shared lived experiences that are true whether you're born in poverty in India or whether you're born in any place on the planet. And I think that gives us an orientation for what is good and bad. That ultimately, through that humanistic lens, gives us an understanding of what is useful and useless. And beyond that is a lot of beliefs, a lot of pink elephants dancing on the
Well, and that's what's interesting is when you look through most religions, most philosophical idealisms, you find most the same values.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
A lot of the same structures for living
Yep.
a good life that's productive to your community. A lot of the same.
Yeah. All the Abrahamic religions,
Yeah.
basically, they're all very similar in their and
but
how they want you to carry yourself through the world.
Well, but even looking in other religions, even looking at just philosophies, Buddhism,
I mean,
Well, Einstein said it best: everything is relative.
Everything
Up is
relative.
up for everyone.
That's right.
Down
Up
is down
is up
because
for
of
everyone.
relative to our lived experience on this planet.
But that's exactly right, because so much of that is based on the fact that we are all the same. We all want love.
Yeah.
We all want to protect our families. We all want to live satisfied lives. We all generally have the same motivations and generally have the same good feelings from generally the same types of things. Maybe not the same specific things.
Right, of course.
And generally the same bad feelings from the same types of things. And that's what those different value systems through the belief systems are based on. But mostly the value systems line up, and they spend most of their time not arguing or fighting with each other or anybody about what's right or wrong, but about which God exists or doesn't, about the color of the furniture, basically, for the most part.
Well, I'd push back because I do think there is an element of right or wrong, and it comes into this other element, which is a time and historicity, because there are specific people and specific things that happen that people will agree are good or bad. Beyond your understanding of theological frameworks, like let's say that you are the leader of a church and all of a sudden, you're having all of these immigrants come in and your church is swelling and you have new people coming in and this is a wonderful thing. You're doing good work. And let's say instead that you're someone from the community and this is like this hurting you in some way. The nature of good and evil and good and bad is subjective and relative, to bring it all back together. So I think that it naturally comes in the course of any organization, any institution, especially religious ones, that there will be difference of opinions. And those difference of opinions lead to strife and conflict, and those conflicts lead into new sects and divisions. Like, let's say, for a great example is, different types of Christianity, what is good and what is evil. Literally, that's how you break off and say, no, the Church of England says that this, or Catholicism says this, or it's okay to marry your cousin, or it's not okay to have women priests, or it's okay to do this, or all of these different segments about what is right or wrong. I think that is actually the crux of a lot of theological history and the specific historicity of those things. But beyond that, I do think that you're making a larger point that's true, because the things that undergird that are all very similar directionally. While they may not 100% line up, they're more or less parallel, because there's a directionality to goodness. And there's a directionality to evil.
Yeah. And I think I think I think everybody inherently knows, there is an inherent knowing morality, I think. I know that is influenced by environment, but I do believe that we know when we're harming someone else, and that may be knowing because it's a physical, because you're causing a reaction, right? You may not know that you're harming someone from an emotional, but it's not good to hit somebody or stab somebody, right?
Well, yeah, and I think you have, the different interpretations of good and evil, right? Because there's a certain interpretation of good and evil that requires intent.
Correct.
Right? And then there's also the interpretation of good and evil that's just based on
drugs are bad.
This hurt me, this didn't. Right? the chicken's always going to think the fox is evil because the fox eats the chicken.
Right. Well, there's
Fox
natural
doesn't think
predators.
he's evil.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The fox doesn't think eating the chicken's an evil act.
Right.
When I eat a chicken, I don't think that I'm evil.
Correct.
But does the chicken?
Chicken's dead.
I think Nietzsche would call that relative position.
Right? It's relative.
Especially in the context.
It is.
And so exactly. And so we have the concept of good and evil based on relative position. And usually when we're talking about on relative position, we're talking about
Correct.
very short term stuff. It's not usually extended time period stuff. It's
one year you may be a millionaire, the next year you may be a pauper. I mean, just on that one spectrum of class.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's the same as like $20 to one person and, is $2,000 to another.
And in religion, you see also the good and evil based on, sometimes certain things like sanitation and cleanliness.
Right.
Like it's evil to drink this or to eat this.
It's evil to not get circumcised. It's a great example of cleanliness.
Yes, right. It's evil to eat pork. You have these other things that are based on getting sick, hygiene. Before they had science. And that kind of language to use this. They created these laws that they knew were just like basic health things. Like you don't eat this because it's making everybody sick. We don't say that. We say God said don't eat this because that's what people listen to.
Right.
And so you also have good and evil in religions based around a lot of that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. And most of the time when we find them fighting with each other or fighting with other sections of society, it's not based on what we agree is the right way to treat people.
Right.
Although it seems like that, right? It's very much based on things like, well, men shouldn't wear women's clothes and women shouldn't wear men's clothes. And they've attached good and evil to those kinds of things, which aren't actually anything to do with good and evil or anything. There's no harm. There's none of that. It's just a cultural something that happened then in that specific.
Yep.
And that's what I mean about how often all of this fighting isn't about good and evil. We, for the most part, actually agree almost wholeheartedly, universally across the board what constitutes good and evil. And most of the time you can sit down with almost anybody and have that conversation. And for the most big, good, evil, we'll agree. And then we'll start getting into these things that have nothing to do with it. And have caused so much harm based on that.
Or just based on that.
Based on that.
Yeah. I think, I think if there were the two, out of all the conversation we had, I think the two parts of the conversation that I felt could have impacted Mike, right, was talking about inheriting the kingdom of heaven and intimacy, with my, with how I addressed when I was in the Christian church, and that my issue about the inheriting the kingdom of heaven, that my child couldn't inherit the kingdom of heaven because they were LGBTQ, and that is a sin. And what I really was trying to communicate to him was about intimacy and how the love that I share with my husband and how I feel about my husband, right? And this is for any partner, is that I couldn't get there without our shared intimacy. And I do mean physical intimacy, because you can be very emotionally intimate. And listen, if you don't have physical intimacy with something, that doesn't mean that you don't love someone, or, you know what I mean? It's just that there's, for me, the healing of having someone that I love so wholly, and someone that loves me so wholly, I want my children to be able to experience that, and their sexual partner should have absolutely nothing to do with that. And so the minute that you want to tell me that that is the one thing that will stop my child from inheriting the kingdom of heaven, like, I need to jump off this train, right? Because I do not want my child to not experience what I have experienced, right? With regard to intimacy and like love, right? And a partner and a relationship with someone. And so, and that was kind of my response to it. Like, I don't believe that God doesn't want that happiness for my children.
Well, and even, and this is always real hard for me. I try and bring it up whenever I kind of have one of these conversations with somebody who's really who's Christian. And that is that everybody sins, right?
Yeah, right.
You know, suspending my disbelief for the conversation, everybody sins. So everybody's either not going to heaven, or everybody
is going
to heaven through God's grace, right?
Right.
That's
right.
You know, that we want to shade a lot of these things, but when you set certain things out there, that's what it is, right? Either God forgives you for your sins,
Well, don't you have to ask?
or doesn't, right?
Oh, valid point, Thea.
Isn't that
Okay.
the big thing you got to
You have
specifically
to
ask?
actually ask, yeah.
Well, the whole thing
it's
they
not
said,
just
like,
automatic.
Even that's debatable because not the whole world's Christian.
I mean,
You
I
can
know.
grow up in China and never meet a Christian. There's places you can grow
Oh, yeah.
up.
Really? Where? Sorry, no, I'm
I'm
sorry.
just saying,
that's
but there's
all those
there's-
mission trips. They have started going to China.
We have this kind of perception that the whole world's Christian because we're real Christian, and the whole world's not. Christian's
Nope.
not even the biggest religion in the world.
Yep.
And
Facts.
so there's places in the world where you can grow up and never meet a Christian and never hear about the Christian God and never read the Christian Bible and all of that sort of
But
stuff.
isn't
So
colonialism basically justified off of that belief? Like,
That- well,
we
that-
have to
that- and that-
spread
and
the
that-
goodness
and that-
and
Yeah, it's-
civilization.
that's how they do
Hello,
it.
yes.
But what you're also saying is all of those billions of people just automatically went to hell.
Right.
That's what they said.
And
that is
makes,
literally what they said.
some of them do, some of them don't. But that makes no sense.
It makes no sense.
That makes no sense. So, but either way, now back to what I
Right.
think I could try and remember that I was talking about, which I can't.
I know. It's fine. It's fine. It's
No,
okay.
I remember it was really interesting because you were talking about like the importance of the sexual intimacy, and it really struck me because I identify as gray sexual, which is closer to the asexual spectrum,
Okay.
and I think that makes me a little atypical
Yes,
in the
okay.
trans community. At least as far as I don't think it's not that there aren't like all sorts of non-binary
Of course.
and asexual, gray sexual, non-romantic folks. But for me, it's always been very difficult. And one of the things that when I started therapy and talking to different, doctors and beginning
Mm-hmm.
my transition is that I had always struggled to have that physical intimacy.
Of course, right.
And when
Makes sense to me.
and it's something that it didn't make sense to me until it did make sense to me.
Right.
Because I would
yeah.
have this thing where I would get to this point and I would be disconnected from my body. I'd be 1,000 miles away. I would be feel heavy, and all of a sudden disconnected and unable to be myself in any of those moments. And that kept a lot of intimacy and relationships and things, and it made me feel broken, as if there was something wrong. And I didn't know how to deal with that. And trying to go with different things and transition for me wasn't ever treated as a panacea. I never thought it was some solution. But I do think that loving myself, liking myself, those sorts of things, and how they relate to the body dysmorphia and to the gender dysphoria and how those things relate and the roles and the way that I see myself and the way that I feel who I am, that those things, by forcing myself into
Yeah.
that role, that caused a lot of sexual trauma for me.
Yeah.
And then I think that my transition has been a process of healing and actually trying to discuss. I think, for a lot of folks, there's this idea that trans women especially are heavily sexualized, and we're seen as like, oh, we're only doing this because we want to be treated as some or this, or we'll have some sort of kink.
I feel like a lot of times it's the opposite. Like,
Well, that's exactly the thing. For me,
Yeah.
it was the opposite. It was like,
Yeah.
I am not this type of person, but is it so wrong that I might want to have a family, or that I might want to find some sort of intimacy, or that I might want to be okay with my
gosh,
own body?
no.
But for a lot of folks, you talk about sin. You talk about these. It's just a sinful idea, even of itself. And then the lack of empathy or understanding of how difficult that could be, that, you know, I have this deep love or romance for someone, or that I care a lot for them, or having these little glimmers, if you will, of physical attraction to them, and then not being able to reciprocate, and how that hurts them, or how they're not able to understand, or like, well, we're having this amazing connection and we're doing all these things, but then all of a sudden not.
Right, because it also affects
hurts.
We naturally want to have, like, especially if we're exploring being with a partner, like, you want to feel wanted by that person. And so when we're working through, like, sexual trauma, or we're working with body dysmorphia, and, like, still trying to, like, work through your authentic self, and that was a barrier, and that barrier for yourself, it does also affect the other person, and it prohibits like the like next, like, step in intimacy, because they may not feel like, and you're like, no, but really, like, I do, like I am, but I'm trying to figure this out, right?
And I thought for a long time that meant that I just wouldn't have a relationship, or that I'd have to accept that I'm just not going to be in that sort of, or just be alone for the rest of my life, which is a really sad thing to think about.
No.
But I do think that, you know, I've since transition, I've been dating, and I've been meeting more people and having these relationships, and it's not perfect, because, like I said, nothing in life is easy, and
but it'll
the
get
work
easier
on ourselves,
the more you do it,
is sometimes not about just the external stuff. Sometimes that's other things.
Yeah.
And understanding and accepting that has been key for my healing and growth as a human being, not just my transition. So I just want to bring that up, because you're starting talking about how you, for your child and for your family, how it's important for them to have this future. And if we actually do come and have an honest conversation about what brings families together and love, there is that physical component of it. And like I said, it hurts my heart to think that, like, oh, that's just not for me.
Well, and I think too, like,
think
if you've got two asexual, like, people who find partnership with each other, I think that physical intimacy doesn't have to do with our reproductive parts. Okay?
It's true.
So, I mean, in the sense of, yes, like, stimulation and things that kind of drive us to, like, wanting to touch the other person, right? Yes, there, you know, but we all have actually body part, like, outside of our bottom genitals, right? Like, everybody has body parts, like, north of our waist, that also can bring that stimulation, that can also bring intimacy, right?
Sometimes south. Some people like their feet.
Well, sometimes that. Okay, yeah, okay, got it.
I got this
well,
one spot behind my knee.
Not my thing, but some people like the thing.
No kink shaming. I don't kink shame anybody. You're into what you're into, okay? As long as you're not harming somebody else or yourself, like, you're into what you're into.
Yeah, it's not hurting me if you like people's feet.
That's right. Same. But I do, you know, but I think that's kind of part of exploration of the different types of intimate relationships that you can have, and, like, what does intimacy mean for you? Like, and as I've aged, right, intimacy has changed for me too, right? I'm already in menopause at 47, so for me, I mean, you know, I, like, adore my husband, but we certainly are not nearly as intimate as we were 15 years ago, right? And I mean, I am tired, y'all. Like, I'm tired. Like, I just want to go to bed. Like, you know, and so that I wanted to relay that, and I always do try very much to talk about the kingdom of heaven when I talk about where I was with the church, and I stayed with the church, the Christian church, long after, like, I had those feelings, because that church had given us a sense of community that we were missing just outside of our other social networks, right? But my child being out as someone in the LGBTQ community when they were teenagers really it actually just compounded and enhanced how I feel about organized religion in not a positive way.
What did that have any impact on your relationship or social network in the church?
No, actually. I mean, no, it didn't. Because here's the thing, like, y'all know me. I make my position very clear how I feel about something. And my thing was, if you want us as members of the church, like, I don't bait and switch anybody, right? Like, I am who I am. I make my positions on things very clear and known. And if you don't like it, you can go fuck yourself. That is literally how I feel about it.
This is why I adore you, Melissa. You're fantastic.
Well, because I don't think we should be living in this world where we should allow others to like us for the things that make them feel comfortable. You like me as a human and a person because of whatever need I meet for you, because that is also sometimes in relationships, right? Or I am who I am, and like I don't want you to project your own, like, whatever, you're friends with me because I make you comfortable. Like, if I make you uncomfortable, let's talk about it. Let's see why I make you uncomfortable. And a lot of times I make people uncomfortable because I'm just honest. And people don't want to hear it all the time. And they don't like it, especially if I'm going to say something that that for them attacks their core belief system. And it's one of the reasons why Republicans often find me intriguing, because Republicans operate with a certain level of what they consider to be honesty. I don't consider it really honesty, but it's kind of that, like, I say what I mean, right? Because we Gen X people especially, we've grown up in a world where it's like, if you're not teasing people, being sarcastic, like, I joke sarcasm is my second language. It really is. I try to do it without harm, and I certainly have not been successful in that, many times. But yeah, like, for me, like, I just want to be authentically me, because if I'm not being myself and sharing, like, what my beliefs are, my values, right? My beliefs and values, then you're not really getting to know who I am.
This is a common theme that we talk about. Authenticity.
Authenticity. Well, yeah. And that's been, I talk about authenticity a lot because I lived the majority of my life mask. We all mask, right? I am very, very aware of my masking. And I actually, I mask intentionally now. Because I mask when I know I need to mask, and versus masking unintentionally, right?
When do you think the masking began in your life? When did you first put on a mask or find a mask or feel like you needed one?
I think for anyone that deals with childhood trauma, that starts in childhood.
Sure.
Because it's acceptance, and you want, some kids who are oppositionally defiant, like, don't necessarily want that. But, like, I feel like most kids want to be loved and accepted by their parents. And when you come from, abuse and stuff like that, like, that's why I would always kind of joke, probably not the best joke when my kids were young, but I was like, if I would take their laptop away from them for a week, which I rarely, like, discipline my kids in that way. I was probably didn't discipline my kids. I probably should have in situations a little bit more than I did, right? But my kids are amazing, and I don't regret any of that. I do have things I regret, but not really necessarily that stuff. But
let's talk more about your regrets.
I know, I do.
No, I am sorry.
No, we did actually. I did bring it up at Trans Family Dinner. One of the things that I regret very deeply.
But that's because you're an honest and self-reflective person, and you're always trying to grow. But continue.
No, I deeply regret the only real arguments that my oldest and I, and we'll talk about it when they're here, was their Halloween costumes. It was my oldest who said to me when they were, young teenager-ish, 12, 13, something like that, like, clothes don't have gender, Mom. We were at the store, and they had looked at a shirt and was like, "Oh, I like that shirt." And looking back now, I think Alex might have been testing me to see, knowing that what my response would be, and I wouldn't put it past my child to, at that age, to have been like, I'm gonna get my mom right now.
But there's no way to do it without testing. Like, okay,
I love it.
I'm sitting in a situation where I'm like putting myself with my mom or something. I'm like, "Hey, Mom, I really like this dress."
Yeah.
There's no way for me to test that without it being like, "What the fuck?" fuck are you talking
right,
about?
Right. And so, well, here's the right. And so, well, Alex was like, I like this shirt, and I'm like, yeah, it's cute, but it's a boy's shirt. And Alex was like, Mom, clothes don't have gender. And I'm like, oh, valid point. Right. And so, like, I don't argue. I really didn't, unless it's something like is a core belief or value. I really didn't argue with my kids. Like, if my kids said something to me in response that was like logical, I'm like, oh, valid point. Touche. I learned something today, and you're totally right. And I've never been opposed to telling my kids, like, you're right, because kids at 12 can be right. So I do regret that. That is just one of my parental regrets, is just fighting with them over Halloween costumes, because like they always wanted to be what I consider to be boy costumes. And I was like, don't you want to be a bride? Don't you want to be like a princess? And like literally Alex would be like, nah, I want to be the dragon, Maleficent, or whatever, and so and I bought the costume, but it was always like this like kind of thing to get there, but I would always buy the costume, but I do regret that. But anyways, so wrapping up dinner, back to trans family dinner with Mike Callan. I think it went really well. What do you think, Cody?
I think it went good. I mean, I didn't stay in there the whole time for all of the conversation. I popped in a couple times and
gave dropped a few nuggets.
I popped in at one point because he gave that whole thing about the God that is and the God that you want.
Oh, the God that is and the God you want.
And so I did pop in.
I thought there was only one God.
Well, the God that is just how God is. The God that you want is just how God wants to be. And I remember I popped in and told him, well, the God that is has made trans people like Miss Victoria, who's wonderful. So are you going to accept what the God that is has done? Or are you going to keep on with the God that you want? Mm-hmm. And so I did pop in for that. But for the most part, once I saw Miss Victoria coming, I gave my seat up. I was like, let's make sure.
We'll have to see if we can't get her on next week so that we can continue the conversation, because when we get into the specifics about this, I know that a lot of people who are religious and are looking for this type of content or looking for these discussions in good faith.
Oh, yes, 100% agreed.
And that's one thing I can say about Miss Victoria is a lot of times we have edges and pain, because there's a lot of pain that goes into this, and Miss Victoria has her own
trauma.
Pain.
There's a lot of deconstructing religious trauma is a thing right now, but sure. Like
when I think about what happened to her coming out in her early 60s into a church, like I said, y'all, you're gonna want to tune into next episode. We try if we can't get Miss Victoria on here to tell the story herself, but it was amazing. And next month's Trans Family Dinner is going to be amazing too. Maybe we can get another school, but just every month. No.
Well, funny enough, I actually, got a phone call from
Kim Melnick.
Kim,
I bet.
And literally Kim was like, so, well, when do you have these? I didn't even know about this. I'm like, they're once a month. And I said,
'cause I baited her.
And then she was like, well, okay, well, where is it? And I'm like, and I love Kim. Kim, I love you. If you ever listen to this podcast, I love you. But she was like, well, where is it? And I'm like, okay. So I wouldn't be surprised if Ms. Melnick decided to join it.
That would be lovely.
It really would be lovely.
Absolutely.
I adore.
It truly would.
I do adore talking to Kim. She's really great. So I would like to I think we've kind of wrapped up that and maybe get to just this very important news story. I mean, there's a lot of news going on.
So the last message to Mike Callan.
Yes. So the last message to Mike Callan. And so this has been a really, I think that it's been a very difficult week in the community. The death of a 16-year-old non-binary student in Oklahoma. So trigger warning, we are going to talk about Nex and what has been going on in Oklahoma. So I think that at least I do believe that when things happen, they happen kind of the way they're supposed to happen. Okay. Right. And that not any death or anything like that. Not that. But what I mean with Mike you having coffee with Mike and laying some of this groundwork and establishing some of these relationships with people who I think are realizing that they may have been subject to a lot of propaganda. And one of the things that we tried to convey at the Trans Family Dinner was how this propaganda affects the community and how it contributes to hate crimes and violence. And then this week, we see the culmination of this disgusting, hateful rhetoric that has been going on against trans and LGBTQ children. And not just adults, but how it is affecting other children because of their bigot parents and not teaching their children. They're literally teaching their own children to dehumanize their peers who are also children to the point that they can beat a child to death.
What gets me isn't so much that it's that they're always doing this psychologically, and that when you go and you harm yourself, there is no news, there's no report,
Right.
and all the good and decent folks like y'all too don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Because to talk about it is not good. It's painful and harsh and not fair to the family and not fair to their memory. But this, we don't even get that. We don't. And to me, it's like when we talk about these statistics, we talk about percentages, we talk about numbers, it's very hard to put a direct number to the number of trans youth who are murdered or die because of the hateful rhetoric, policies, bullying, constant. It's hard to say this is this X number because so many folks just give up. And I think to myself, it's gotten so bad that it's not even a matter of like giving up or not having anywhere to turn. It's just that active, malicious beating. Like that's, and how that's what they're inspiring. And then I think to myself about what happened in Chesapeake last week. The Chesapeake School Board passed policies that were more draconian than even the ones that we passed here in Virginia Beach school boards.
Oh, absolutely.
And we were going to have a guest on tonight from Pride in the Peak, and hopefully we can have him on in the future so we can talk a little bit about this. But when we talk about these sorts of consequences, I can't sit here and not think about what was it? Was it at Cox, or was it at First Colonial High School, or which was one of the schools that had a student that was ripping down pride flags off of the
Callan.
Callan. Okay. And you think about these little moments of rage from people who are taught that hate. Unwieldy children, because children, you wind a child up, children can, there's no control, there's no experience, there's no wisdom.
Y'all met middle school kids? They are mean.
Yeah.
Oh my, middle school?
I have two kids in middle school.
They are mean.
I have two kids in middle school right now, and that's. Here's the thing: is it's easy to say like, well, just homeschool your kid, but you can't.
No,
it's not just that easy to do. So many of us have to send our kids to school, and this is, believe me, over the last couple years especially, this is a conversation my wife and I have had several times
about the potential
about if we had to, could we, how would we, all of those things, because for parents of trans children right now, you have to send your kid to school. A lot of places, they have to use these bathrooms.
Yeah.
We have truancy laws.
We have
no,
truancy laws.
It's truancy
laws. There's no
money.
money.
And it's not just like,
there's no support.
That's what people don't understand about truancy laws. It's not just like, oh, you get a note from the school. No, you will give criminal charges. They will charge you.
Yeah. Absolutely. They would absolutely.
And
also, I'm sorry, but public school is for everyone. Every child should feel safe and welcome and be in an environment they can learn. It is what we as citizens pay for. We pay for our children to be educated.
Yeah, but they're not.
But
they're not for trans and non-binary children right now. Yeah. And every day, we send our kids to a place that we know is not safe, but we have to, required to by law. And we spend all day terrified.
Yeah.
My daughter basically only uses the bathroom in the nurse's office because of stuff like this. Whether it's been at times to change for gym, she doesn't go to a locker room. She only uses the bathroom at the library or the bathroom in the nurse's office because of things like this. If my child's school calls me and I am sitting on the toilet, I don't care if I am mid-pinch, I pick up that phone. Mm-hmm. I've picked up my phone from my children's school in the middle of a national awards ceremony on the other side of the country because it was the school number, and I never know what that call's going to be. Mm-hmm. Every day I go home, the first thing I do is make sure my kids are safe. If I'm not going home, the very first thing I do when I get off of work, when I know it's about the same time my kids are supposed to be home, before I came here today, hi, honey. Yeah. Are the kids home? Mm-hmm. How was their day? Was it okay? And from the moment I leave my home to the moment I know my kids made it home safe, part of me is holding my breath. Yeah. Part of me in the back of my head is waiting for that call. When I see things like this happen, when I read articles like this, it's just a affirmation of all of those fears, of all of those moments of, and I'm not a panicky person. I don't have an anxiety or anything like that. My wife's definitely the anxiety one. But there are so many times a day when I have to take a breath and focus my mind away from the things that could happen to my child. And it's not, that's another thing I think a lot of parents don't get, you know. Most parents don't have trans children, so most of the parents I talk to are not the parents of trans children. Right. And I often will hear like, oh, I couldn't imagine. And that's what it is. Every day we are living with a fear and a threat that other parents can't imagine.
That is correct.
And it's not a 1 in 10% chance.
No,
I know that unlike cis straight kids or anything like that, if my child makes it out of school without getting assaulted, we were in the smaller percentage.
Right.
There's more of a chance. There's a much higher chance that my child is assaulted or attacked sexually or physically.
Yep.
At the school than she won't be. And every day I'm forced by law to send her there.
You are. And I think, do you want to say something at the end? I think that's one thing, Cody, that so many parents absolutely do not, they make it relative to, you know, they worry about their kids, you know, if their kids come home from school. Not in the same way.
Not in the same way.
It's not in the same way at all.
Like there's, you know, 1% chance, 5% chance something's going to happen to your kid at school today.
Much higher.
There's a 25% chance to 30 plus % chance something's going to happen to my kid. Yep. And I mean, that's not just something's going to happen. No, there's 100% chance somebody's going to say something mean to my child or treat them poorly at school.
That's right.
That's not a...
That's
absolutely going to happen.
It's a guarantee almost. Yeah,
that's going to happen every day from somebody.
Yeah.
No, it's a 25% chance something worse is going to happen.
Correct.
To that kid.
So with Nex Benedict was the child, 16 years old. According to news reports, Owasso Police Department, Owasso, Oklahoma, was called out to Bailey Medical Center by Sue Benedict, which is Nex's mother, on February 7th, the date of the attack, at around 3 p.m. The Owasso Police Department stated they were not made aware of the fight prior to being informed by Nex's parents, signaling that Nex's school failed to report the incident to the authorities. News reports also suggest that Nex was released the same day, only to return the following day when they were rushed back to the hospital. And we should also note that after the fight happened in the bathroom, Nex, injured, was suspended from school for 2 weeks. They were punished for the fight and they were suspended. So,
was the other student suspended?
So it is, I highly doubt that information will be released because the policies for schools typically are that they do not disclose punishment of other minors. Like, so basically unless those parents.
But do we know that they have like a stated policy? Because I know Virginia Beach schools
everybody gets suspended.
Everyone who's in the fight.
Oh, I know. My daughter was suspended for a week she was literally attacked.
Okay.
She literally was my youngest daughter was attacked in the classroom by another girl.
Oh my God.
And then my daughter was suspended. I mean, I will say this: the security guard had to it was a fight or flight response, but she was still having hold of the girl's hair. Because she pushed her from behind and started attacking. Oh yeah. So, but then I was so upset because Savannah was suspended from school. So yes, it's like a zero tolerance policy thing, but she was suspended for 2 weeks. Now I just have learned since we've been on the podcast that within the last hour, Nex's family released their own statement because there have been, First of all, I would like to just kind of recap really quick. I'm running out of time, so I can't go over all of it, but it's just really important to know that 54 bills are still open and on the table and are presented to the Oklahoma legislature that is anti-LGBTQ, anti-trans.
54 anti-LGBTQs.
Bills.
In the Oklahoma legislature
alone. It's over 500 nationwide, but just Oklahoma alone.
Over 500, we haven't made it out of February.
Why won't they leave us alone?
Because they just like Nazis, they need to vilify someone, and it's awful. And so there have been other things that have come out about this that, they're trying to say that that their death, they want to get a toxicology report, and that the death is, they don't think the death is related to
anything they can to shift accountability.
Right? So that has then led to now apparently Nex's family having to issue a statement, and I guess within the last hour, Nex's family. I am getting this from an independent reporter, Judd Legum. Legum. He is an independent journalist that I follow who gives, great information. According to their press release, it says Nex's family releases their own statement, which is quoted as, while various investigations are still pending, the facts currently known by the family, some of which have been released to the public, are troubling at best. We urge those tasked with investigating and prosecuting all potentially liable parties to do so fully, fairly, and expediently. Notwithstanding, the family is independently interviewing witnesses and collecting all available evidence. All right, how y'all know the cops aren't doing their job already? Because the family's having to go and independently interview witnesses and all parties. So apparently, the Owasso police don't release the autopsy, even though they say it's complete. So they've already completed an autopsy, and they are not releasing publicly. But the police claim that Nex did not die due to, quote, trauma. So the Owasso police update was investigation update from as of 2/21. And then they kind of spell it out. And I think this is important because I had some questions about how, like, why didn't the school nurse call the police? Why didn't the school nurse call an ambulance? Like, what happened? And so, although this just does give a good timeline. It's the Owasso Police Department has been actively involved in an investigation into a physical altercation that occurred at the Owasso High School and Owasso Public Schools, has been cooperative throughout the investigation. The students involved in the incident were all juveniles, and juvenile files are confidential and inaccessible to the public in most circumstances. From reports, records, and statements of witnesses, it appears that, first bullet point, on February 7th, 2024, a physical altercation occurred in a restroom at the Owasso High School West campus. The physical altercation was broken up by other students who were present in the restroom and a school staff member who was supervising outside of the restroom. I'm going to need to see the camera footage.
Just a second on that, too, because they say that altercation, I read somewhere else in the school statement, the altercation only lasted 2 minutes.
I mean, you can do a lot of damage to somebody.
2 minutes is 2/3 of a boxing match, actually. A boxing match is only 3 minutes. That altercation lasted 2 minutes with a supervisor standing outside the bathroom door?
Yeah.
Take 2 minutes to push the door open?
2 minutes and you couldn't hear. A lot of those bathrooms don't have doors. You know, they're open enclaves, like, for the bathrooms. So
I encourage anyone listening to just hold their breaths for 2 minutes right now.
Yeah.
And tell me that it's a really short period of time.
Tell me that was a
short
period
period of time. And then afterwards, go ahead and fill out the bully report form for the Owasso High School district there.
It says all students involved in the altercation walked under their own power to the assistant principal's office and nurse's office. School administrators began taking statements from the students present in the restroom and began contacting parents and guardians of the students involved in the physical altercation. Each of the students involved in the altercation was given a health assessment by a registered nurse at the school, and it was determined that ambulance service was not required. While it was determined that ambulance service was not required, the school nurse recommended that Nex Benedict visit a medical facility for further examination. On the afternoon of February 7th, an Owasso school resource officer was assigned to respond to Bailey Medical Center, where Nex Benedict was being examined. The school resource officer interviewed Nex and their parent concerning the altercation at the Owasso High School. The following morning, the school resource officer followed up with the parent. On the afternoon of February 8th, Owasso Fire Department medics were dispatched to a medical emergency involving Nex Benedict, who was transported to the St. Francis Pediatric Emergency Room, where they later died. While the investigation continues into the altercation, preliminary information from the medical examiner's office is that a complete autopsy was performed and indicated that the decedent did not die as a result of trauma. At this time, any further comments on the cause of death are currently pending until toxicology results and other ancillary test results are received. The official autopsy report will be available at a later date. This investigation is ongoing. So as a result, it looks like the Benedicts are, as they said in their statement, they're independently interviewing witnesses and collecting all available evidence. And so what we have is ACAB. We can't trust the cops.
Because this isn't just about the school, right? This is about the whole state of Oklahoma.
It is.
And all different levels of government.
Correct.
And how their policies that they've been passing have directly resulted in this child
That's right.
losing their lives.
That is correct.
And then beyond the autopsy, saying that it's not trauma or not, if you go in and there's an elderly person and you just scare the crap out of them and they die, like you've murdered them. Trauma is like bodies are surprisingly fragile. If you go and attack somebody, you have to expect that person is going to have irreparable damage done to them, if not death. Because you can slip and fall and hit your head in one wrong way. You can get punched in the gut, and then hours later, there are so many things that can happen to your body.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, and it's the reason why they bring the toxicology report up, and you're always going to hear the toxicology report, right when they're trying to victim blame somebody.
Victim blame. Heard it with George Floyd.
Yep, that's exactly. Oh yeah. Yeah, this is their first go-to when they're victim blaming is the toxicology report.
Mark my word, if they find hormones, they will blame the hormones.
Oh, there's something, but here I don't care if they find that that child ended up with a drug overdose the next day, because I promise you, no matter what it was,
It was a direct result of
those attacks and
That's
that
right.
bullying and what those people did to that poor kid at that school and in that bathroom is what caused that child their life.
That is correct.
Whether you want to say it was trauma, physical trauma or not, it was trauma.
It was trauma
that killed Nex Benedict.
Right. And so this is where, as Cody brought up, we need to talk about Ryan Walters, who is the state of Oklahoma. He's the superintendent of their Board of Education, or whatever his official title is. He's this young moron, if you ask me. But he has been made as the superintendent of all of Oklahoma schools. And y'all, listen.
I mean, that's all you need to get power in the Republican Party is be young and
Yep. And be willing to spread their misinformation and propaganda. And also then this man enlisted the help of right-wing extremist Chaya Raichik. Raichik runs the X account Libs of TikTok, which routinely promotes anti-LGBTQ propaganda to its 2.8 million followers. Raichik's posts have inspired violent threats, including bomb threats. In January, Walters appointed Raichik to serve on the Oklahoma Library Media Advisory Committee. Raichik does not have a professional background in education and has never worked as a librarian. She's a former real estate agent. And I don't know if I've mentioned this, and I hope I don't really offend horribly my real estate and mortgage friends, but I was in the mortgage business for a long time. So the fact that she's a former real estate agent does not surprise me. She lives in New York, not Oklahoma. So can you please explain to me why the superintendent of Oklahoma schools is getting a social media content creator, influencer of hate and bigotry to participate in a library, like a committee in a state they don't even live in? It's absolutely abhorrent.
I mean, to do what they do best. Influence hate and bigotry.
Influence hate and bigotry. So he appointed her to serve on this Oklahoma Library Media Advisory Committee, right? Raichik's appointment came after she repeatedly targeted students and teachers in Oklahoma. So he was like, oh, you're targeting Oklahoma? Let me bring you on to Oklahoma. Let me give you some power in our state. In April of 2022, Raichik singled out Tyler Wren, a teacher from Owasso School District, the same district that Nex attended, for supporting LGBTQ plus students. So what we have here is we are seeing since since 2022, we are seeing an active campaign, like bigotry campaign, that has been going into Oklahoma, speaking out, getting teachers that, teachers have like actually resigned. That teacher ended up, I need to actually, the teacher ended up resigning, but Raichik's posting resulted in Wren being harassed and smeared as a predator by a Republican politician. He eventually resigned. And apparently Nex's grandmother said that Nex was very angry about that. And that happened in 2022. So when they were 14, like, this child knew about this, like what was going on. So
this child has been bullied,
and then bullied in their school, and right? Bullied.
And you see, the term that comes to mind for me is state-sponsored terrorism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when you have brought the Treasury of Oklahoma and you've paid someone to do something, to single out teachers and students, and that results directly in the death of a child.
Yes.
You have officially, because the whole point of this, the whole point of putting, right, no one could ever say the other reason was to intimidate and scare through stochastic terrorism, trans parents, trans families, trans kids out of those rooms to make them uncomfortable. And they did it. They knew what they wanted to do and they did it. They made this child uncomfortable. They made this child question their future, because that's the whole thing. It's not like, oh, you're going to hurt yourself, you want to give up. But it's like, it's the only reason you get there is in a dark place where there's no way out, because there is no hope in future. And when you have literally the state government.
That's exactly right. I just retweeted or X'd that, and like basically I took that tweet, and I just actually whatever it is now and said, this is state-sponsored terrorism. You make such a valid point. You, like, literally, you are allowing state-sponsored terrorism. And this, the death of this child, I want to just honor Nex by reading a statement from the parents about Nex, which is Nex Benedict, a 16-year-old non-binary high school student, loved nature and watching the television show The Walking Dead. Nex enjoyed drawing, reading, and playing Ark and Minecraft. Nex also had a cat, Zeus, whom they loved. Nex's family traced part of their roots to the Choctaw Nation and were on a journey to understand more about Nex's identity, like many other parents of transgender and non-binary youth. On February 7th, 2024, Nex was brutally and viciously beaten inside a bathroom at Owasso High School in Owasso, Oklahoma, where Nex was a student. Nex was taken to the hospital and released, only to be readmitted the following day. On February 8th, 2024, Nex succumbed to sustained injuries and tragically died. So Mike has not responded to that text message.
No, I sent and I made sure to grab an article that started out describing what stochastic terrorism is.
Oh, beautiful.
And how Rycheck played their part.
Okay.
And how the policies played their part.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't actually, the article doesn't even talk about Nex's death until several paragraphs in to build that up, because I wanted him to be able to see this is how this happens.
Yep.
And this is what it costs.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I've not got a response from him yet.
Yeah.
And I just
Which
said,
is we.
yeah,
I
I just
mean,
said, please
yes,
take the time
right.
to read this article and understand that these are the kinds of things that are happening as these policies are passing.
I do want to be clear that I would not say an appropriate amount of time has passed since you showed me the text you sent to say anything other than he has, he needs to take the time to read
he's
and respond,
received the
right?
text.
He's
It's only
received
been
the
like
text,
a day.
Right? And so, however, Mr. Callan, don't think for 1 second I won't fucking drag you if you do not respond to this.
Just for our listeners, I want to give the definition of stochastic terrorism, just in case you're listening and you're
Yes.
going to learn. Stochastic
Our big
terrorism,
words.
it involves the use of mass media to provoke random acts of ideologically motivated violence that are statistically predictable but individually unpredictable. So it's the sort of thing like we know that
know
We
if
know
I
it's
just,
going to happen. We
happen.
just don't know where.
Right. And when.
When.
Mm-hmm, where and when. So, anyways, well, this has been a super heavy ending to this show. So, I mean, I can totally make people laugh by, letting people, like telling everybody my husband ate edibles accidentally this morning in the fridge, but no, I know. We can't. I'm like,
It's heavy, but here's the thing
Heavy.
this isn't over.
This isn't over.
It's not over.
And here's part of it. We have this month. Let me go back up to my little thing here. On the 26th,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
with Equality Virginia, we're going out to Lobby Days, and we're going to Richmond
Yeah.
to help make sure we fight back against these laws in our state.
That's right.
That's correct.
On the 17th, we're having our next trans family dinner
Mm-hmm.
and building our community. On the 23rd, we're doing our D&D group, and we're enjoying each other's company and playing together. FemFest is March 26th. On the 28th is our financial literacy workshop, where we help educate and strengthen people in our community. On the 29th is our Trans Day of Visibility at the Southeastern Transgender Resource Center. And there'll be a ball afterwards where we celebrate who we are. Because no matter what, trans joy will always defeat hate.
That's right.
Rest in peace, Nex.
This podcast is brought to you in partnership with Collective Tattoo and the Calos Coalition. We are listener supported, so if you like the show, please consider donating to us on Patreon at patreon.com/talkingtransparency. Like, share, and subscribe across social media, and be sure to visit our Linktree at linktree.com/talkingtrans.